All right. So the attachment styles. So my sources for this episode are verywellmed.com, betterhelp.com, and simplypsychology.org. Before we get into the different styles, let's first talk about the theory of attachment in general. So this theory first came out of Freud's theories about love, but John Bowlby, if I'm saying that correctly, is another researcher who devoted extensive research to this topic. Bowlby described attachment as, quote, a lasting psychological connectedness between human beings, end quote. His view is that experiences in early childhood have really important influences on development and behavior later in the child's life. According to Bowlby, attachment styles are established through the infant-caregiver relationship. So that starts day one. So baby's born, caregiver-baby relationship starts to form, and these attachment styles are already starting to develop. He also believed attachment styles had an evolutionary component aiding in survival. Another quote from him, the propensity to make strong emotional bonds to particular individuals is a basic component of human nature, end quote. Bowlby went on to describe that there are some important characteristics of attachment, and those characteristics are as follows. You have proximity maintenance, you have safe haven, you have your security base, and separation distress. So let's talk about those. So proximity maintenance is the want to be close to those we're attached to. Safe haven is the desire to return to those we are close to in moments of fear. So if we are stressed or sad or scared, something's going on, who do we run to? Or that's our safe haven, right? And then we have secure base. So the attachment figure acts as a safe base that the child can then stray away from to explore their surroundings, but they know that their secure base is still there. They feel safe with that, safe enough to go explore on their own. And then separation distress, basically separation anxiety. So when the child is away from their caregiver. So a parent dropping their child off at school or preschool or what have you. So based on these characteristics, Bowlby drew three key conclusions. So the first conclusion were children who are brought up with confidence that their caregivers will always be there are less likely to experience separation anxiety, which this article was giving me life and was making me feel like a really good mom because Lily's never really cried. I think the first day of her old preschool in Dallas, she cried just because they took her out of her car seat and she wasn't sure what's going on, but she loves school and all that. And then recently her teacher at this preschool told me that she not only is she she knows that I'll be back, so she's confident, so she can be happy and she's happy to be there. But there's another student or another preschooler, one of her friends was crying because she missed her mom, and Lily went over there and gave her a pat on the shoulder and said, "It's okay, mommy will be back." It's the best thing that I've ever heard in my life. So, yay. So I did it. So conclusion number 2, this confidence is formed during critical points of development. So there's infancy, childhood, and then adolescence. And these expectations that are formed during these times, they'll remain relatively unchanged for the rest of their life. So conclusion 3, these expectations are directly tied to the child's experiences. So if the caregiver is responsive to the child's needs during these critical periods, then the expectation is that they always will be responsive and that they'll always be there. The bond will be better, whatever. The child will be secure knowing that their caregiver is always going to be responsive to them. I then found something interesting called Ainsworth's Strange Situation Assessment. So to expand even more on this theory of attachment, a psychologist named Mary Ainsworth performed a study in the 1970s called The Strange Situation. So the purpose of the study was to observe how children reacted to being briefly separated from their caregivers or from their attachment figures. So in this case, it was their mothers during the study, and then reunited after. So the study included children between the ages of 12 to 18 months. The strange situation was as follows. So first, mom and baby are alone in a room. Baby explores the room with mom watching. And then suddenly a stranger enters the room and talks to mommy and then approaches baby. And then mom quietly leaves baby in the room. And then mom comes back later to comfort the baby. Briefly, she's not gone forever, but she leaves for a few minutes and then comes back. Out of this study came the 3 major attachment styles: secure, ambivalent insecure, and avoidant insecure. Later, as attachment theory was researched further and more extensively, a fourth style, disorganized insecure, was added to that. So there you have it, the four main styles of attachment: secure, ambivalent, avoidant, and disorganized, or disordered. Now that we know some background, let's get into the details of these different styles. So secure attachment characteristics. So this style of attachment with their children is what all parents should strive for from day one. I know I just used the dreaded word should, but secure attachment is what you want. So children that are secure have secure attachments with their parents. They become visibly upset when their caregivers leave, but they're happy and have positive behavior when the parents come back. When they're in moments of fear or stress, they seek comfort from their caregiver. Contact from their caregiver is happily accepted. They prefer parents to strangers. Strangers can still comfort them, but there's a clear preference for their parents. Parents of securely attached kids tend to play with them more. The parents of securely attached kiddos also react quicker and are generally more responsive to their needs. Securely attached kids tend to have more empathy in later childhood when empathy develops, and these kids are also less disruptive, aggressive. They're more mature than kiddos with the other attachment styles. And so when they become adults, when these kids are securely attached become adults, they make trusting and lasting relationships, they have good self-esteem, they share feelings with strangers and friends, and they seek social support. Sadly, as normal and expected as developing a secure attachment with children is, it doesn't always happen that way. According to the Very Well Mind article, a classic study concluded that of the people that took part, 56% of adults said they had secure attachments, 25% said avoidant, and 19% said ambivalent. So the next one is ambivalent. So ambivalent attachment characteristics. So this attachment style is relatively uncommon. According to Very Well Mind, only 7 to 15% of infants in the U.S. have displayed it. Through observational research, it was even found that ambivalent attachment was consistently linked to low caregiver availability. So teachers may describe these kiddos as clingy or overly dependent, I guess because, if the parent isn't always available, then the child, needs comfort from somewhere, right? So ambivalently attached children are wary of strangers. They become incredibly distressed when they're separated from their caregivers, but when their caregivers come back, they're not always, they don't get much comfort out of it. Sometimes the children even reject their caregiver's attempt to comfort them, and they can even become aggressive. These children also learn that love and affection are fleeting. They become fearful of the unpredictability. So it's, makes sense, right? If your mom or your dad, you never really know if they're going to comfort you or, so it's scary, it's scary for a little kid. Ambivalently attached children become adults, and then they are wary of getting too close to other people. They fear that partners don't actually return their feelings, so this leads to lots of breakups. They feel the relationship is cold and distant. They become devastated when relationships end, more so than like a normal, breakup. Breakups are sad, but they become really devastated, and they cling to young children for a sense of security. So when I read this, my first thought was kind of like an inner child kind of a thing. So if you're an insecurely attached adult, you kind of want to return to like a time when you felt secure. And so a lot of times people can think back to a moment in their childhood, and if they see other kids, like other small children that are securely attached, they tend to, I feel like, it makes sense to me. Okay, so the next one is avoidant attachment. So avoidant attachment characteristics in children. So they avoid their caregivers, particularly after some absence. They don't seek out comfort or contact from their caregiver. And there's no preference between their caregiver and complete strangers. So literally anybody could just come up to them and then when they become adults, they have trouble with intimacy. So they may avoid it entirely with excuses. I have a headache. I have a early morning, whatever, what have you. They may also fantasize about other people during sex with their partner. These adults tend to be more likely to engage and enjoy casual sex because it's, I guess, more no pressure situation. They show little emotion in social and romantic relationships. They either don't want or don't know how to share feelings with others, and they show little support for their partners during stressful times. Mostly unable to share feelings and thoughts with them. They're married and they can't get on like a good emotional level with their partner. Anyway, so then you have disorganized. Just the last attachment style is disorganized or disordered. It's been called several things. So this style is often a mix of different behaviors. So it's kind of, I guess they attribute disorganized to like children that act in ways that could be avoidant or secure or whatever. Like it's kind of a big mixture. The children are often dazed and confused. They're apprehensive around caregivers. They don't really know what to expect. And then as adults, it's said that they take on parenting or parental roles, which I don't know, I guess I'm not just like becoming an actual parent, but I assume this means like in friend groups, like you're kind of the mom of the group or something. The children, so their children may act as the caregivers to this disorganized or disordered attached adult. So they may, unintentionally, mostly, start to parentify their children, which isn't good. But it happens, I guess. I don't know. I think it happens quite a lot. So this style of attachment was linked to inconsistent parent behavior. So further research showed that parents who instill both fear and reassurance at the same time to their children, this contributes to the disorganized, confused attachment. So the child is both scared and comforted, and it's confusing. And I'm confused, like I'm an adult, and I'd be confused if somebody was like really happy to see me and then like, abusive. So the article on simplypsychology.org added fearful as the fourth attachment style instead of disorganized, but the characteristics are the same. Basically, the style is fraught with unpredictability, which makes children and later adults fearful. They're scared. Adults tend to also be self-sabotaging. All right, so this brings us into breaking it down a little further when these children become adults. So the 4 adult attachment styles. So these come from ambivalent attachment. So if a child has ambivalent attachment and they grow into adulthood, they'll fit into one of these 4 categories. So the first one is anxious preoccupied attachment. So this comes with high anxiety, low avoidance. Adult relationships tend to be fraught with drama and chaos, and there's not much trust. So they may feel a greater need for reassurance in relationships, so that constant validation and approval. They try to attain self-acceptance by constantly seeking approval or validation from others. So they require higher levels of contact and intimacy. They crave intimacy, but they're also anxious about it or anxious of it. So I guess it leads to confusion among partners. And they're also anxious, their partners, as much as they crave the emotional and physical intimacy, they're worried that partners won't be able to meet all of their needs. And at times they may get distressed if they interpret this validation as insincere. So they want the validation, but sometimes when they get the validation, they feel like it's not, like it's fake, like their partners are just saying that to calm them down. And so that creates even more stress. So problems in relationships for anxious, preoccupied adults, they tend to be magnified or even invented. They'll just invent a problem and then, start a fight about nothing or something like that. They're pessimistic, anxious, and paranoid. They have those bad views of their relationships. They're more jealous and possessive. And they have negative self-image, but a positive image of others. So they feel unworthy of the great, everyone else is great around them, and they just don't measure up. They are preoccupied with dependency on their parents, and they still struggle to make them happy and proud. So even though they're adults and they have their own lives now, and they're no longer kids, and they're no longer dependent on their parents because they have a job or they have a partner, they're married, something, they still strive to make their parents proud. They still want that parent validation and approval, and they want to feel like, they just want mommy to say she's proud, All right, so then the next style for adults is dismissive avoidant attachment. So this is low anxiety, high avoidance. It may manifest as a fear of commitment. Relationships formed are more distant. They don't want to be tied down. They show independence through burying themselves in their hobbies or work. They may maintain busy social lives that don't involve their partner, which I guess, I don't know, like the guy that's always going out with his buddies and never invites his wife along, kind of thing. They have narcissistic tendencies, and they're also passive aggressive. They have positive self-image but negative image of others. So independence is huge for them. They don't think that others measure up. They have a tendency to downplay the importance of attachment and deny experiencing any stress regarding their relationship. So if something's happening in their relationship and it does cause them internal stress, they're going to ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist. And they've learned to suppress their emotions, just related to that. They've learned to suppress their emotions on the outside, but then they still experience them. They still experience internal turmoil, internal conflict. So this can cause trouble in relationships because we're not mind readers. So if on the outside it seems like dude doesn't care, then, I'm going to think he doesn't care. But then, I'm not going to see that he's actually really stressed out. So, so this can cause a lot of problems in relationships, especially not just when there's problems in a relationship, but also just like any strong emotions, like, your partner never says, I love you, or never really shows you his feelings. It can cause problems. You don't want to be married to a brick wall or anything like that. The next style is the fearful avoidant attachment style. So this is both high anxiety and high avoidance. So these fearful avoidant attached adults are drawn to forming close relationships while also being scared of them. So internal conflict constantly. They can obsess over their partners while also pushing them away. They create lots of confusion. They have a harder time defining healthy boundaries. They are scared of losing themselves in the relationship. So that can be why they push their partners away, because they're like, oh, this is too much. They can seem pessimistic in relationships. They have a negative self-image and a negative image of others. So it's basically just everyone's bad. They fear both intimacy and independence in this way. And they display behaviors typical of avoidant children, so social withdrawal, and they have trouble trusting others. So a study concluded that avoidant or fearful avoidant adults, they're likely to have more sexual partners and higher sexual compliance. So higher sexual compliance could be due to, they learned as children that their boundaries didn't matter, or they just have poorer boundaries because they weren't able to learn proper boundaries or how to create boundaries or what have you. So they prefer to have more sexual partners as a way to get the physical closeness while avoiding the emotional vulnerability and all of that stuff. They may expect relationships to be toxic, chaotic, because that's probably what their childhood relationships were like. So when you grew up in a house that was chaotic all the time, you're just going to grow up thinking that that's what all relationships are like. I mean, it makes sense. So they also tend to be self-sabotaging. So they expect bad things to happen and will find any reason to damage the relationship. They may accuse partners of something they didn't do or threaten to leave their partner, things like that. Okay, now it's time to relate everything we just learned about attachment styles back to the season's theme of generational trauma. So there's lots of evidence to suggest that attachment styles are passed down, and most of the information for this segment came from simplypsychology.org. All right, so in 1985, a study was conducted that found a strong link between security of the adult's model of attachment and that of their infants, especially between mother and infant rather than father and infant. So mother and infant just, the study concluded they just have a stronger bond. So the same study also suggested that dismissive adults were often parents to avoidant infants, and preoccupied adults were often parents to resistant ambivalent infants. So out of this, there also came a challenge to it, which is the temperament hypothesis. So an alternative to that, the alternative to this was the temperament hypothesis. So it's argued that temperament actually contributes to these attachment styles. So the hypothesis says that a baby's temperament affects the way a parent responds. So the baby affects the parent, and thus the parent, reacting to the baby forms the attachment or whatever. Babies are born with a certain temperament, which usually remains the same forever. So this hypothesis is saying that it's the infant's temperament that explains their issues with relationships as adults, good or bad. So honestly, I know that temperament is absolutely a contributing factor here, but I believe it doesn't all fall on that. So babies are born blank slates, right? So that although they may come out with the not so cheerful temperament, their parents respond to them and choose to love them and choose to, react to their temperament. It has a big impact. So I think that you can't just say, oh, it's just the parents, or oh, it's just the baby's temperament. I really do think that it's mostly on the parents, but baby's temperament could have something to do with it too. So it's our job as parents to, make sure our children know they can depend on us with what they need. We want them to be independent too, of course, but it's our job to keep them safe. And so, even if a kid has like an angry temperament, or he's, never in a good mood, he can still have a secure attachment with his caregiver because his caregiver is always there. And, caregivers learned how to, cope with his angry temperament. And then he grows up to be a securely attached adult and everything's fine. So I think that, the way we're parented just has a lot to do with how we end up, instead of, I don't know. My girls have really great temperaments for the most part. So I feel lucky with that. But yeah, I definitely, regardless of, even if they didn't have the best temperaments, I would still be really focused on, making sure that I did everything that I could to make my attachment with them secure. It's my job. It doesn't, it's not theirs. It doesn't fall on them. Anyway, so I also found this pretty cool, concise explanation on parenting styles and attachment. So how parenting has an impact on attachment styles. So I found a really concise way to explain it from parentingforbrain.com. So the securely attached parents, so they tend to have authoritative parenting style. So if you remember from the last season, Brittany and I kind of went over, there's authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and then avoidant. And so the authoritative was sort of like a mix between, you're not authoritarian, you're not yelling at them all the time, but you're also not just like letting them do whatever they want. So authoritarian or authoritative is kind of in the middle. So that's the sweet spot, I guess. That's what I try to do with Lily, although it's not always easy. So yes, they tend to be authoritative parents. So they also are, so securely attached parents are more likely to raise securely attached children. They're responsive to their child's connection-seeking behavior. So they're always, their kid wants a hug. They're always accepting the hug. And they're mostly available and attentive to the child's needs. So mostly is a crucial word here because, of course, it's impossible to be responsive 100% of the time, right? It's not going to happen. We all have our bad moments, but just I've heard it described as you want to be a good enough parent, right? You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be good enough. So I think I mentioned, maybe not, maybe I just mentioned this to Brittany on the side, but there's a podcast that I was listening to and it was talking about parenting, and the guy was actually talking about attachment and all this. This is, why I was so interested in all of this. It's fascinating to me. But he said that really parents only need to get it right about 50% of the time for their kids to be good. So you're doing fine. Anyway, securely attached parents will have children that feel safe to explore, and they use their caretakers as a secure base. So going back to the safe haven and security base, they know their parents are there. So the ambivalently attached parent, or otherwise known as preoccupied, so they tend to show inconsistent, unpredictable care for their children. So sometimes they're super on top of it and sometimes they're not. But again, to go back to what I just said about the 50% of the time thing, this is more unpredictable than that. So this is, it's not that the parent just happened to get it wrong by accident. It's just like they're just not there. They're not around. It's unpredictable. The kid never knows when they can go to their parent or when they can't go to their parent. It's confusing. So the children that are raised by ambivalently attached parents, they are anxious, unsure about their caretaker's availability, and they show approach avoidant behavior. So they get apprehensive and scared when people try to approach them. Okay, so then we have the avoidantly attached parent. So this parent is emotionally rigid, so they'll show anger to their child. So if their child is having big emotions, this parent will just, make it very clear that the kid is bothering them and they don't want to deal with their emotions, and just, they're not really showing emotional support to this poor child. And they reject connection-seeking behavior. So if their child just wants a hug, they won't be there, which is heartbreaking. This isn't even a thing, but so the children of avoidantly attached parents, they see others as cold and rejecting, and they avoid people to protect themselves. Okay, so the last one, we have the disorganized attachment parent. So the disoriented, disordered, disorganized, whatever you want. This disorganized parent, they are a source of threat or fear. They're unpredictable, so they're frightening to the child, and they're typically abusive. So the child will grow up with disoriented behavior and childhood trauma, or they'll develop complex post-traumatic stress disorder in some cases, which is actually going to be my topic for next week. So next week, in the next episode, we'll discuss what can happen when a child does experience trauma in childhood, and if it's ongoing. I'll go into detail about complex post-traumatic stress disorder, my personal struggle with it, and ways to cope and eventually heal from it. I found lots of great resources on that. So yeah, I hope you guys go on to listen to that one, and I hope you guys liked this one. Thanks. Bye.